Hello, wanderer. I assume you seek some comfort and peace. You're in the right place. Picture yourself wandering in a village centuries ago, where the houses are timbered and thatched, the streets are soft with mud after rain, and life moves to the slow, steady rhythm of daylight and dusk. In this soft telling, we will explore how ordinary people once lived, how they woke, worked, ate, slept, and dreamed. How for most life was a constant balance between hardship and the small comforts they could gather. As we move within these centuries-old shadows together, let your mind find rest in some of the most difficult, yet somehow mesmerizing times in history. So, find your most comfortable position and imagine yourself waking just before dawn in a small medieval village. Your bed is a simple wooden frame, stuffed with straw or rushes. If you are lucky, there is a woolen blanket, woven by hand, coarse against the skin but welcome against the chill. Beneath your feet, the packed earthen floor is cold, and the smell of the hearth, ashes, and yesterday's smoke clings to your clothes. The roof above you is thatched with straw, the walls wattle and daub, patched and repatched over generations. In winter, frost clings stubbornly to the beams, and your breath makes small clouds in the dim light. A rooster calls out somewhere in the half-darkness, a steady reminder that time waits for no one, not even for a few more moments of warmth beneath your rough blanket. Outside, the village is just beginning to stir. Thin trails of smoke begin to curl from the few chimneys that pierce the low roofs. Peasants stumble sleepily from doorways, blinking at the pale dawn and heading to the field where they will work until the sunset. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, animals, and the faint promise of baking bread. You join your family at the hearth, where a pot of pottage, a thin vegetable stew, simmers if there is anything left from the night before. Bread, coarse and dark with rye or barley, might be broken apart and dipped into the warm broth. If you are fortunate, there is cheese, hard and sharp, stored from better days. Meat is rare, mostly reserved for feast days or for those with coin enough to buy it. Then the day's real work begins. For most, this means the fields, a patchwork of narrow strips worked by hand, passed down from parent to child. Plowing, sowing, weeding, harvesting, the rhythm of their lives measured not by the hour but by the turn of seasons. Imagine the weight of the tools in your hands, wooden handles, worn smooth by calloused palms. The soil clings to your boots, thick and heavy. The sun, when it appears, offers warmth, but little comfort when the back is bent all day. Children also work with their parents, scattering seeds, scaring off birds, fetching water from the well, often little more than a muddy hole at the edge of the village. Women tend small gardens, feed livestock, mend clothes, spin thread, their work as constant as the crow of the rooster at dawn. Evenings bring a brief respite. The hearth glows again, and families gather close. Candles and rushlights flicker, casting shadows on rough wooden walls. Stories of saints are told, some local gossip around the town, praying, chanting, and memories of the elders. Winters bring its own trials. Food must be carefully rationed. A failed harvest means hunger. Illness slips easily through the village. Fevers, chills, and ailments with names half understood possibly end with bloodletting. Yet still, people wake, gather wood, tend animals, break the ice in buckets to wash. The rhythm goes on. There is some comfort in small celebrations, holy days, the village fair, a marriage, a birth. These moments punctuate the monotony, a reminder that joy and hardship often walk side by side. The darkness settling over the village now, the fires burn low, the livestock settle in their pens, and the people drift to sleep, wrapped in blankets that smell of wood smoke and straw. Through it all, life remains a constant struggle. Yet within that struggle, the rhythm of their days, their labor, their laughter around the fire, and their prayers whispered before sleep, carry them forward. As you are here, listening, imagine that quiet village, humble hearths, muddy lanes, people waking and sleeping in the steady heartbeat of the medieval world. Now, we will drift onward from these common fields and smoky cottages to the story of one life that rose, however briefly, above the ordinary flow of time. Now, let us leave the muddy village paths behind and wander into the life of someone whose story is still whispered through ledgers and old stones. A medieval merchant, whose ambition wove through the tapestry of hardship and opportunity. Imagine yourself standing at the gates of a bustling medieval town, perhaps in England or the Low Countries, maybe along the banks of the Rhine. The sun is barely up, yet the streets are already alive with the muted clatter of carts, the soft lowing of cattle brought to market, the chatter of traders from far-off ports. Our merchant, let us call him Thomas, though his true name is lost to time, was born in a small village not unlike the one we just left behind. His father tilled the same thin strips of earth that countless ancestors had worked, the soil giving just enough to keep hunger at bay, but never quite enough to lift the family beyond the fields. But Thomas was restless. Where others saw only furrows to be dug and grain to be stored, he saw paths leading outward, roads that wound past hedgerows and forests, carrying goods, news, and dreams from one settlement to the next. As a boy, Thomas walked behind a pack-horse laden with sacks of wool, the region's treasure, destined for the nearest fair. There, under flapping canvas stalls, he watched men haggle over bales of cloth and barrels of salted fish. He learned to listen more than speak, to weigh the worth of a coin and the worth of a promise. Over time, he gathered enough to buy his own cart, then a second. He bartered wool for salt, salt for iron, iron for spices that smelled so sharp and foreign they seemed almost magical. Pepper, cloves, nutmeg, luxuries that turned simple stews into feasts and dull bread into delicacies for those who could afford them. Thomas, by lamplight, in his small counting room, quill scratching against parchment, recording debts and dues. No computers, no calculators, only memory and ink, trust and suspicion balanced in careful lines. His days were long and uncertain. Bandits lurked in forests. Roads washed out in storms. Illness could sweep through town and close the market in a breath. And yet, this life, precarious and exhausting, offered him what the plow never could, a chance to climb, if only by inches. He hired a small staff, a clerk to help with accounts, an apprentice to mind the stall when he traveled, and a few strong men to guard his goods on the road. He learned to read not just numbers, but letters, contracts, and the subtle art of a seal pressed into wax. His house, once no more than a rented room above the shop, grew into a timbered dwelling with a heavy wooden door and glass in the windows, a rare luxury that caught the light of the sun and the envy of neighbors. Yet comfort did not make his life easy. Guilds controlled trade with rules as strict as any king's law. Taxes weighed heavily, demanded by lords who saw in Thomas's profit a source for their own coffers. Competition was fierce, and an unlucky season could strip away a lifetime of careful gains. Still, each morning Thomas rose before dawn, just as he had as a boy. He listened to the hush of the street before the carts rolled in, the hush that reminded him how thin the wall was between success and ruin. In his later years, he gave to the church a new candlestick, a small stained glass window, a donation for masses to be said for his soul. A merchant's wealth could not buy a noble's title, but it could buy a measure of remembrance, a small insurance that his name, or at least his prayers, would echo on after his bones turned to dust. Thomas, now older, sitting by the fire in his counting room, ledger open on his knees. He runs his fingers over the parchment, worn thin at the edges, and closes his eyes against the crackling of the hearth. The rhythm of his life, like the villagers, was steady, but lined with restless footsteps and whispered bargains. Through him, we see how, even in a world bound by soil and serfdom, a clever mind and patient risk could carve out a fragile path to something more. Not a crown, not a castle, but a little house with glass windows, a well-fed family, a name remembered in ink and stone. So let us thank Thomas for his company tonight, and let his ledger close with a soft sigh. We leave him behind, candle guttering low, and follow the quiet trail he has left for us, deeper into the hidden corners of medieval life, where secrets sleep beneath the earth and behind monastery walls. Now that we have walked the muddy village paths and run our fingertips over the ledgers of an ambitious merchant, let us slip further back, not in time, but beneath it. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet field at dawn. A faint mist lingers over low hills and hedgerows, and beneath your feet lies something half forgotten, waiting patiently through centuries to be uncovered. In so many parts of the old world, the ground holds secrets, buried walls, shards of pottery, scraps of parchment sealed away in monasteries, waiting for curious hands and gentle brushes to coax them back into the light. A team of archaeologists, boots damp with dew, gently scraping at the soil with trowels no bigger than your hand. Their work is slow, rhythmic, a careful dance of brush and breath. What they reveal, layer by layer, is a glimpse into a life no one wrote down. Perhaps they find the outline of a medieval village long since reclaimed by fields and hedgerows. Dark stains in the earth show where wooden posts once held up humble homes. Homes like the one you woke in at the start of this story. Charred seeds tell of a hearth that once crackled with warmth. Animal bones whisper of meals prepared with quiet gratitude and cautious hope that winter would not last too long. In a monastery's ruins, they find fragments of illuminated manuscripts, delicate letters curling around the margins like ivy. The monks who copied these pages by flickering candlelight knew that words could outlast walls, that ink could hold a prayer longer than any whispered voice. Plague pits, quiet, solemn scars of a sickness that moved through towns and villages like a cold wind. A reminder of how fragile life was when medicine was scarce and prayer was often the only cure people could offer. There are small treasures too. A pewter badge, lost along a pilgrimage path, shaped like a scallop shell or a saint's face. A child's wooden toy, smoothed by little hands centuries ago. A single coin dropped on a market day, its design worn thin by countless trades. Each piece is a quiet voice saying, "I was here." I lived, I toiled, I laughed, I prayed. The grand chronicles tell of kings and battles, but these humble relics remind us that the beating heart of the medieval world lay in the ordinary. The patient scratching of a plow in rocky soil, the creak of a loom, the hush of cloisters where quills scratched out verses in Latin, page after page. And even now, under modern fields and quiet towns, these stories rest in darkness until chance or curiosity brings them to light. An old well-being cleared behind a farmhouse. The stones lift away to reveal pottery, a rusted knife, a scrap of leather shoe. These remnants are so plain, yet they conjure an entire life. A girl leaning over the well to draw water, the creak of the bucket, the soft splash as it dips below the surface. A moment so ordinary it vanished, yet here it is, echoing back to us, centuries later. So tonight, as you lie still, imagine the ground beneath old towns, a hidden library of broken walls, worn coins, half-finished prayers. Think of the careful hands that find them, clean them, label them, and tuck them safely in drawers and museum shelves, so that a fragment of that distant world remains in ours. These secrets sleep quietly until we listen. And as you listen, drifting gently, we will rise now from the soft earth and turn our gaze toward the other end of the medieval world, the lords, the courts, the high stone walls that stood watch while fields were tilled and secrets buried. Now, with the quiet hum of secrets still lingering in your thoughts, imagine yourself standing at the foot of a great stone wall. Above, the battlements stand sharp against the dusk, banners stirring lazily in the wind. This is the other side of medieval life, the world of lords and ladies, kings and queens, courts and castles. While most labored in fields or workshops, a few moved through echoing halls of carved stone, where tapestries muted the chill and flickering torches cast shadows on armored guards. A grand hall at night. The hearth is massive, fed with logs as thick as a man's leg. A boar turns on a spit. The air is warm with the smell of roasted meat, sweet wine, and fresh bread. Musicians pluck at lutes in a corner, their quiet tunes weaving around the soft murmur of courtiers, trading gossip and gentle insults, wrapped in polite laughter. Yet even here, life was far from effortless. A noble's wealth was matched by obligations, endless feasts and negotiations, fragile alliances sealed with marriages, lands to defend, taxes to collect. A crown was not so much a symbol of leisure as a weight that pressed heavily on sleeping minds. Imagine yourself as a young page darting through this world. Your task is to hold your lord's cloak as he steps from hall to courtyard, to keep his cup filled, to watch and listen and learn the delicate dance of rank and favor. You hear whispered bargains, promises made by firelight. You glimpse letters sealed with wax, carried across kingdoms on horseback. Nobles could command armies, yes, but they could also lose everything in a heartbeat. A single failed siege, a cousin's betrayal, a king's favor turning cold as winter stone. Castles were built high not just for splendor, but for safety. Thick walls against blades and burning arrows, ramparts from which watchmen scanned the forests for approaching banners. And within those walls, daily life ticked on. Servants rose before dawn to stoke fires and sweep the rushes clean of yesterday's crumbs and whispers. Kitchens steamed with the labor of countless hands, preparing feasts for the privileged and simple fare for the retainers. Noble women embroidered by candlelight, weaving gold and silver thread through linen, while sharing quiet rumors. They managed households larger than some villages, overseeing accounts and stores of salted meat, casks of ale, bolts of cloth stacked like treasure. Even amid this wealth, hardship lingered. A king might wear a cloak lined with ermine, yet tremble at the threat of plague or rebellion. A lady might sleep on a feather bed behind silk drapes, yet fear a forced marriage or the uncertain fate of her children sent away to strengthen alliances. Power, like the merchant's coin, came with risks. Some rose, dazzling and bright as dawn, only to fall, names struck from chronicles, their seals broken and forgotten. Some clung to their titles for decades, dying old in drafty chambers, while young squires plotted futures of their own. Still, for all the splendor, the stone walls grew cold at night. The grandest bedchamber, hung with tapestries to keep out the draught, could not banish winter's bite. The flickering rushlights cast shadows that danced on carved beams and ancient shields. So while the peasants worked the fields below, and merchants traded in bustling towns, the nobles lay awake in high towers, turning over plans and fears, counting allies as carefully as coins. Tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the castle at rest. The great hall, empty now, hearth coals glowing soft and red. The courtyard is silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl. Somewhere, a sentry leans on his spear, fighting sleep beneath the weight of his mail shirt. And within these walls, the rhythm is the same, a constant struggle. A life shaped by duty, fear, hope, and the fragile promise of legacy. So whether in the humblest cottage or the grandest keep, the people of the medieval world shared one thing, the same quiet dream of a tomorrow, however uncertain it might be. Now, let us wander softly into another thread woven through every medieval life, the church. Imagine yourself in a small stone chapel, its single stained glass window glowing faintly with the first light of dawn. The air inside is cool and still, scented faintly with candle wax and the must of old wood. For the people of the Middle Ages, faith was not a distant notion, but a daily rhythm, as certain as sunrise and sunset. Bells tolled the hours for prayer. Saints watched silently from painted icons. Candles flickered before altars where whispered hopes rose like smoke. Most could not read the Latin prayers carved into the stones or inked onto parchment, but they felt their meaning in every ritual. The splash of holy water, the scent of incense, the rustle of robes in a cold nave. A farmer might pause before dawn to cross himself, asking protection for his crops. A mother would murmur prayers for her child's fever to break. Monks rose long before sunrise to chant psalms that echoed through stone cloisters, voices blending with the hush of sleeping fields. Faith offered comfort, but it carried fear as well. A bad harvest, a sudden sickness, a storm that tore roofs from cottages, all were seen as signs, punishments, or tests. And so the church guided not just souls, but daily choices: when to fast, when to feast, when to fear, when to hope. Imagine the soft rustle of a priest's robes as he walks the village path, stopping at each cottage to offer blessing or fear-provoking warnings. His words weave through thatched roofs and earthen floors, binding the community in belief as tight as any stone wall. In this way, the rhythm of medieval life was stitched to the rhythm of bells, marking time not in hours alone, but in devotion, ritual, and the quiet comfort of faith. Let your mind drift from the hush of the chapel to the open road, a winding track that cuts through woods and meadows, carrying people whose lives were shaped by wandering. Picture a line of pilgrims on a muddy path, staff in hand, feet wrapped in worn leather. Some limp with blisters, some hum a quiet tune to keep the cold at bay. They travel for days, weeks, even months, chasing blessings, miracles, or forgiveness promised at distant shrines. Alongside them, minstrels move from town to town, carrying stories, songs, and news. They stand in smoky taverns at night, lute in hand, telling tales of kings, saints, or lovers lost and found. Their words stitch distant towns together, passing gossip and legends like hidden seeds. Then there are peddlers, carts piled high with combs, needles, pots, ribbons, trinkets, small treasures that bring a glimpse of the wider world to a cottage door. For these wanderers, the road was life itself. No safe hearth waited at day's end. Only the promise of a soft patch of earth beneath the stars, and the hope that tomorrow's town would welcome them with coin and bread. Imagine the flicker of a campfire by the roadside, a minstrel's song drifting into the trees. The road was hard and often dangerous, yet it carried freedom that the fields and walls could not. So they walked and sang and told their tales, threads that tied lonely villages together, binding the wide, quiet countryside into one soft story. Now we step into the quiet shadows of medieval medicine, a world where knowledge flickered like a candle in the wind, fragile and uncertain. Imagine yourself lying on a rough bed, feverish, while a village healer leans close, her fingers smelling faintly of crushed herbs and smoke. She murmurs charms learned from her grandmother, mixes rosemary and honey into a bitter draught. Doctors in cities might wear dark robes and strange beaked masks stuffed with herbs to ward off foul air. Barbers doubled as surgeons, their razors gliding from beard to wound in the same day. Much was guessed, little was known. A prayer might stand beside a poultice. A relic might be pressed to the brow, as powerful as any tonic. Yet, in this fragile balance of faith and folklore, they found what comfort they could. In monasteries, monks copied ancient texts by candlelight, Galen, Hippocrates, carefully guarding scraps of knowledge through centuries of turmoil. Gardens behind monastery walls bloomed with sage, lavender, and rue, the apothecary's quiet arsenal. Imagine the smell of those gardens, sharp mint, earthy thyme, drifting through a cloister where a sick monk rests beneath a thin blanket, hoping that healing words and gentle hands will carry him back to his prayers. It was imperfect, uncertain, sometimes deadly, yet it was care, offered with hope in a world that gave so little certainty. Childhood, a fragile season in a hard world. Imagine a small child stumbling barefoot through a muddy yard, chasing chickens away from the door. Older children stoop beside their mother, pulling weeds from the garden. Work came early. Small hands fed animals, gathered firewood, fetched water. But even in this hard life, there was play. A wooden spinning top, carved by a father by lamplight. Dolls made from scraps of cloth. Simple songs, laughter, echoing in muddy lanes. A child might sit by the hearth on winter nights, wide-eyed, listening to tales of knights and dragons, saints and sinners. Stories soften the edges of hunger and cold, wrapping young minds in dreams of something more. School, if there was one, meant hard benches, scratched slates, harsh discipline, yet also the chance, slim as it was, to climb beyond the field or the loom. Many did not grow old. Sickness and hunger took them easily, but those who did grow found themselves quickly bent to the wheel of adult life, work, marriage, the same daily rhythm, repeating like the tolling of a distant bell. Imagine their small voices, now lost to time, giggles echoing under thatched roofs, tiny songs drifting up to rafters dark with smoke. Life in the medieval world was harsh, yet scattered through the calendar were days when hardship loosened its grip, festivals, fairs, feast days that offered a glimpse of warmth and color. Picture a village green on a spring day, bright ribbons fluttering from a maypole, laughter rising like birdsong. Simple ale flows, bread is broken together, and music hums from fiddles and flutes. Harvest festivals mark the relief of crops safely stored. Saints' days bring processions, candles flickering through dark lanes, bells pealing across cold fields. Markets swell into fairs, stalls laden with bright cloth, sweetmeats, exotic spices, jugglers, tumblers, storytellers draw crowds from farms and manors alike. For a moment, the rhythm of toil softens. Neighbors gather, disputes forgotten over mugs of cider. Children dart between stalls, clutching sticky treats. A dance circles the bonfire under a rising moon. These days reminded all, peasant or lord, that life was not only sweat and struggle, but could hold moments of brightness too. A promise that winter would end, that hunger would fade, that laughter could outlast hardship, if only for a night. Imagine you are standing at the open door of a village forge as evening settles in. The sun dips behind the trees, leaving only the warm glow of the furnace to fight back the dusk. Inside, the air is thick and sweet, with charcoal smoke and iron dust. The forge breathes and sighs with every pull of the bellows, a dragon half asleep in its den. Sparks flit and drift upward, tiny embers dancing toward the beams dark with decades of soot. The blacksmith's hammer rises and falls, each strike ringing clear through the cool night air. His arms are thick, his apron scorched and patched, his face hidden behind a sheen of sweat that glistens like the iron he shapes. He hums as he works, a low, tuneless hum that blends with the hiss of steam when hot metal meets cold water. Behind him, the walls are crowded with shapes, tongs, hammers, horseshoes, hung in neat rows, hooks and blades, waiting for the final polish. Children linger by the doorway, shadows on the threshold, watching with wide eyes as iron is coaxed from stubborn or to something useful, something that makes life possible. A farmer waits nearby, leaning on the wooden fence, cap in hand. He's come for a new plow blade, his old one cracked on a hidden stone in the field. They trade a few words about weather and crops. No hurry. There is always work waiting, always metal that must bend to the needs of muddy lanes and restless seasons. On the workbench lies a small iron pot, half finished, waiting for the blacksmith's slower hours. Beside it, a delicate blade for a kitchen, finer than the rough farming tools. He makes such things for barter, a favor here, a meal there. His wife sells nails in small sacks at the market, each nail shaped by his patient hands at dusk. When his work is done, he banks the fire, covers coals with ash, wipes sweat from his brow with the back of his blackened hand. He steps outside into the hush of the village lane, where the night wraps its cool arms around him, and the forge door creaks shut, the dragon tamed for now. Follow now the footpath that winds from cottage gardens to the wild edge of the forest, a boundary drawn not by fences, but by shadows and whispers. At dawn, the village stirs awake. A mother lifts a woven basket to her hip, calls softly to her eldest child, who pulls on boots still damp from yesterday's dew. They step quietly from yard to woods, careful not to wake the neighbors, or what lives among the trees. The forest floor is damp and sweet, with rotting leaves and mushroom caps pushing up through the loam. She knows each trail by memory, where the wild garlic curls low in spring, where berries cling thickest in the brambles, where hazelnuts drop late in the autumn wind. Bird song drifts from the canopy. Somewhere deeper, a twig snaps, perhaps a deer, perhaps something else. She keeps one ear turned for danger, but her fingers move without fear, plucking handfuls of nettles for soup, herbs for teas to ward off coughs when winter presses too hard on thin walls. Sometimes she finds footprints not made by deer or fox, a boot heel half hidden in mud, a broken branch where someone larger passed through in haste. She knows there are men who live between the trees, poachers, outlaws, sometimes men who owe more tax than they can pay and choose to vanish rather than starve. Children whisper that witches mutter curses by the stream. Old men swear they've seen wolves pacing the edge at dusk. These stories pass from hearth to hearth, like coals carried in a pot, warming fears that flicker when the wind howls through the thatch at night. Yet, for all its shadows, the forest is life, a hidden orchard when the fields go bare, a secret refuge when hunger knocks too loudly on the cottage door. When her basket is full, she leads her child back along the winding path. Leaves brush their shoulders, damp with morning mist, and the village greets them again, safer, warmer, for what the woods have given. Now picture the soft curve of a river threading through patchwork fields and reeds that bend low in the breeze. Here, life moves not in footsteps, but in slow drifts and eddies. A barge drifts down the current, guided by two men in wool caps and coarse tunics. One leans on a long pole, pushing off the muddy bottom when the shallows tug at the hull. The other watches the riverbank slip past, alder trees dipping roots into the water, cattle lifting their heads to watch the boat slide by. Their cargo is simple: sacks of barley bound for the mill, barrels of salted fish traded from the coast, sometimes bolts of cloth from distant looms, bright dyes wrapped tight against the damp. At a bend in the river sits a small landing, no more than rough planks and a stone pier. Here, washerwomen kneel knee-deep, sleeves rolled high, slapping wet linen on flat rocks. They gossip over the splash and drip, who's expecting, who's lost a pig, whose husband drinks too deep at the tavern. Their voices echo with the river's hush. Children dangle bare feet from the pier, lines cast with bent pins in hopes of a fat perch. Old men mend nets in the sun, humming tunelessly as the current tugs at reeds and drifts, a faint scent of wet earth and algae. Further downstream, a town waits, noisy, bustling, its quays stacked with barrels, crates, bundles of wool. The barge will dock here at dusk, coins will change hands, curses and blessings tossed back and forth like pebbles in a stream. Then the boatman will find a tavern room with a fire, a mug of ale, and sleep that comes heavy as the river's hush. Tomorrow they'll pull a priver again, following the same gentle path that has carried trade and news for centuries, long before their fathers were born. Step softly now into the hushed stone heart of a keep, a chapel lit by a scatter of candles trembling in the draught. A young knight kneels before the altar, armor polished to a quiet gleam, sword laid across the flagstones at his side. He bows his head over clasped hands, lips moving in prayers half remembered from childhood. Outside these thick walls, banners flap and horses stamp, iron-shod hooves sparking in the courtyard's frozen mud. Pages scurry up stone staircases, arms full of linen and oil for lamps that must not gutter in the night. But here, inside these cold walls, the world feels small and vast all at once, the hush broken only by the scrape of armor when the knight shifts on numb knees. His mind drifts to tomorrow's dawn, when he will stand before his Lord, swear his oaths, mount his horse, and ride out beneath a standard that bears his family's mark. He thinks of his mother's hands brushing his cheek when he was no taller than the sword he now guards, of a father's voice, heavy with pride and fear, telling him to be bold but wise, strong but merciful. He prays not only for victory but for courage, for the clear sight to know when to lift his sword and when to lower it, for the hope that his name will be spoken kindly in hall songs, long after the banners fade to rags in some forgotten tower. Hours drift by in the chapel's hush, the candles burn low. His eyelids sag, head nodding, pulled toward sleep, but each time he wakes, he repeats his whispered vow. When the first rooster crows beyond the ramparts, the knight stands, stiff-limbed but certain. He lifts his sword, feels its weight, and steps into the dawn's first thin light. Another life added to the long, slow story of stone walls and iron dreams. Picture now a pale dawn spilling across a landscape of broken stone and patient labor. Here, at the edge of town, or deep in a countryside hollow, the quarry wakes before the cockerel's second crow. A thin mist clings to the ground as men bend their backs to picks and chisels. The steady tap of iron on limestone echoes like a heartbeat under the open sky. Some hum to pass the time, the tune caught between wind and hammer blows. The quarry master stands among them, eyes squinting at the marks drawn in charcoal on rough stone. He walks the rows of half-cut blocks, nodding here, tapping there, whispering instruction to an apprentice who looks no older than 16 summers. Dust coats every wrinkle, settles in hair and beard, until the men look like ghosts moving through their own pale underworld. The stone resists each strike, but little by little it yields. Slabs freed from the bedrock, hoisted onto carts, drawn by thick-shouldered oxen. At night, the quarry sleeps, but never truly rests. Mice scurry through the leftover chips. Moonlight pools in rainwater gathered in hollowed ruts. The blocks wait, heavy and silent, for the road that will carry them to town, cathedral, fortress. Each stone bears a story, hidden in veins and fossils pressed there when the world was still young. Masons will carve them into arches that lift skyward, vaults that shelter prayers, gargoyles that grin at storms and restless spirits alike. Most who cut here will never see the spires they make possible. Their hands know only the weight, the dust, the dull ache of iron striking stubborn rock. But they trust the dream will stand long after they lie quiet beneath churchyard soil, stone on stone, hope on hope, reaching up through centuries. And now, at last, let us drift to the hush that settles when the day's toil sighs into dusk. The long road home winds through hedgerows, brushed with moonlight, and cart ruts soft with new rain. A farmer walks its length, one boot half split at the heel, the clink of his tools marking each step like a lullaby for the road. He carries the day's weariness on his shoulders, but also a small measure of pride. Seeds sown, fences mended, a calf delivered safe into straw. A mother shepherds her children along the lane's grassy edge, their chatter softening into yawns. One child carries a bundle of gathered sticks for the hearth. Another cradles a half-loaf wrapped in cloth. Tonight's supper, if luck holds, the cottages greet them, scattered lanterns twinkling through small windows. A dog barks once, then curls back onto its mat by the warm door. Chickens shift on their roost, feathers rustling like dry pages in an old book. Inside, the hearth crackles awake, soup bubbles in an iron pot, bread warms on the coals, and someone hums a tune older than memory. A grandfather, too old for the fields now, sits near the fire, telling stories of saints who tamed wolves, of fairies who hid gold beneath hawthorn roots, of ancestors who once fought beneath banners, now lost to moth and dust. These stories drift upward with the smoke, winding through rafters blackened by 1,000 evenings, just like this one. Outside, the fields exhale the day's heat, the lane grows soft and silent, the night folds gently over tired shoulders. Tomorrow, the road will open again, the same chores, the same patient fields, the same promise that home waits at the end, always. And so they sleep, as the road sleeps too, until dawn lifts its pale face over hedgerow and hearth once more. Tonight we rest beside Hildegard of Bingen, a woman cloistered yet unconfined, a mystic whose visions blossomed like wildflowers through the cracks of a rough and watchful world. May her story drift through you like a soft chant, calming your mind, guiding you toward sleep, one gentle breath at a time. Imagine a small stone house in the Rhineland hills, where mists curl at dawn and the wind tastes faintly of pine and river. Here in the year 1098, a baby girl named Hildegard opens her eyes to a world simple yet vast, fields tilled by quiet hands, forests humming with unseen creatures, nights broken only by the calls of owls and the crackle of the hearth. She is the 10th child, a tithe to the church, they will say. As she grows, her eyes wander far beyond what others see. She drifts through fields behind her mother, gathering herbs no one names, whispering to herself of colors and lights that flicker behind her eyelids. At night she curls on a straw bed, listening to the breath of the house, cattle shifting, parents murmuring, the soft hush of the Rhine somewhere beyond the walls. And always the visions come, a brilliance she cannot name, shapes like flames that speak to her in warmth, never in words. When she is still a girl, they send her to a small convent near the monastery at Dissebodenberg. The stone walls are cold in winter, damp in spring. Yet within them, Hildegard finds not confinement, but space, a space where her secret lights can grow. Her life narrows to chants at dawn, prayers at dusk, scraps of parchment scratched with careful letters by candlelight. The world beyond the cloister fades, yet the world within her mind blooms brighter than ever. Years drift past in the hush of the convent. Now picture Hildegard, grown robes brushing simple stone floors, hair hidden beneath linen, hands deep in soil. She tends the convent's physic garden, rows of rosemary, sage, lavender, rue. She learns which leaf soothes fever, which root draws poison from a wound, which bitter blossom sharpens a mind dulled by age. In this garden, the world outside slips away. replaced by the soft hum of bees, the rustle of a sparrow's wing, the scent of mint crushed beneath sandals. Novice sisters come to her, baskets swinging from pale arms, asking how to turn willow bark into medicine, how to brew fennel seeds into a tonic for a child's cough. And Hildegard teaches them, softly, steadily, her voice like a trickling stream that wears down stone, not with force, but with patience. When a peasant knocks on the abbey gate, she greets him kindly, his foot wrapped in rough linen, eyes downcast. She washes his wound with vinegar and wine, packs it with herbs from her basket. No magic, no miracles, only care given freely, and a quiet belief that the earth offers healing for those patient enough to listen. At night, when the herbs hang drying in the rafters, she writes what she knows, listing plants, animals, gems, and their secret uses, each word a seed planted in the dark soil of her time, waiting for centuries to bloom. As the garden grows, so to do Hildegard's visions. She calls them civias, know the ways, blazes of color behind her closed eyes, rolling like clouds, burning like dawn. She fears them at first, yet they return, insistent, wrapping her mind in warmth and light. She writes, slowly at first, then with urgency. A scribe sits beside her, quill scratching parchment that glimmers beneath oil lamps. She describes swirling spheres, fire wheels, angels winged in impossible patterns, visions that tumble through her mind like leaves caught in the Rhine's current. Letters flow from her tiny cell, carried by monks along rough roads to bishops, priests, even the Pope. She tells them what she sees, not with pride, but with the soft confidence of one who knows truth cannot stay buried forever. When doubts come, as they always do, she answers with gentle firmness. How could a cloistered woman write such things? Men ask. She does not shout, she does not fight, she writes, and the words travel further than any sword ever could. Not only words, Hildegard's visions breathe music too, songs that rise from stone floors and cloistered hearts, like incense curling to a vaulted roof. In the abbey chapel, candles flicker. The sisters gather, voices hushed at first, then swelling together in a hymn that drifts through the cold corridors and out into the night. Hildegard's chants are unlike the old songs. They rise and fall in strange patterns, daring leaps of melody, phrases that hang in the air like threads of gold. She teaches her sisters patiently, singing each note until they find the courage to follow her into this new sound, part prayer, part dream. On feast days, travelers passing the convent stop in the shadows to listen. Some claim they hear the voice of angels in the echoing stone. But for Hildegard, it is simpler than that. Music is the echo of the divine heartbeat, a way to remind weary souls that there is beauty hidden even in cold stone walls. Long after the last note fades, the warmth lingers in the hush of the cloister, in the rhythm of the garden, in the calm breath of sleep that follows the final amen. In time, the walls grow too small for Hildegard's visions. She leaves her beloved Disibodenberg to found a new abbey on the green slopes of the Rhine. Rupertsberg here. The wind rattles the shutters, river mist drifts through orchard rows, and her sisters build new gardens among the old stones. Yet she does not stay behind the walls forever. When nobles call, she travels. A frail woman now, robes brushing mud and snow as she rides from village to town, from bishop's hall to emperor's court. She speaks firmly to those who would doubt her, reminding them that pride blinds, that cruelty rots kingdoms from within. Some listen, some scoff, but none forget the woman with eyes like clear spring water who speaks of stars and herbs and the secret music of creation, as if it were a simple story told by the hearth. She returns to her abbey, tired but unbowed, slips back among the garden beds, humming soft snatches of chant as her sisters gather close, eager for news, for comfort, for the steady warmth that only she can give. Years drift into decades. Hildegard's hair pales like morning mist. Her hands grow thin, but still she writes last letters to distant abbots, final pages of songs no one else could dream. One night, as candles sputter in the cold draught of her chamber, she folds her hands and closes her eyes. Some say she saw the same great light that once startled her as a child, now welcoming her back into its warmth. The abbey goes on, new sisters kneel where she once knelt. Her books travel further than any horse could carry her in life. Her music sleeps on parchment until, centuries later, it wakes again, sung by choirs in places she never knew. Drifting through cathedrals far from the Rhine, her garden, too, lives on, seeds of rosemary, rue, sage, tucked into kitchen plots, monastery beds, and windowsill pots kept by quiet hands who know that healing is never just a single life, but a pattern that grows again and again. So now, let her light fade softly in your mind. Imagine the hush of her cloister at dusk, the final notes of a chant echoing through stone arches, the hush of herbs brushing each other in the night breeze, the flicker of a candle guarding dreams. Rest easy under your blanket, your own safe walls, holding back the cold. Breathe slow as her story drifts through you. Visions gentle as moonlight on garden paths. May your sleep tonight be deep and calm, as patient and steady as Hildegard's quiet faith. May you wake renewed, carrying a small, secret light of your own into the bright new dawn. And so, dear wanderer, we leave behind the creaking drawbridges and muddy paths, the flickering hearths and hidden relics. We have walked the narrow lanes of a village waking at dawn, counted coins beside a restless merchant's lamp, brushed the soil away from secrets buried deep, and looked out from the high towers where power kept its uneasy vigil. Imagine yourself stepping softly away from those cobbled streets, across fields heavy with dew, until the distant shapes of castles and cottages fade into the hush of night. The rhythm of their lives, their struggles, small joys, and endless labors fades now too, replaced by the quieter heartbeat of your own breath. Think of how far we have come. The chill of a thatched roof on a winter's dawn, the soft murmur of a counting room at dusk, the hush of a monastery cloister where secrets waited out the centuries, the cold stones of a keep holding both power and fear in equal measure. They lived with hardship pressed into every hour, yet they found small warmths, bread shared beside the hearth, a song hummed by candlelight, a prayer carried softly toward the stars. And here you are now, safe, warm, fed, your roof strong above you, your bed soft beneath you. Their world was harsh, their nights long and cold, yet yours drifts gently toward a deep relaxation. Even sleep with no draft creeping in, no dawn's rooster calling you too soon. So breathe out that ancient dust. Let the soft warmth of your breath anchor you here and now, while your mind drifts where it pleases, perhaps down a muddy lane, past a quiet hearth, or through an orchard heavy with blossoms in spring. May these echoes of the past remind you of how far we have come, and how much there is still to dream. Take care and be well, dear dear wanderer. Rest easy under your sturdy roof, far from the cold stone towers and the frozen fields. May your mind wander around softly through history's quiet corners, returning you here with me.